Everything you've been told about how Native Americans survived winter is a lie. Not a small lie, not a misunderstanding, not a we got a few details wrong kind of situation. A full, complete, embarrassing lie that has been repeated in textbooks, in Hollywood movies, in school classrooms, and around campfire stories for over 100 years. And the truth, when you actually sit down and look at it, is so much more incredible, so much more sophisticated, and so much more human than anything you've ever been taught, that by the time this video is over, you are going to look back at everything you thought you knew and realize you were only ever seeing a tiny, distorted shadow of something genuinely extraordinary. Here's what most people picture when they think about a teepee. A flimsy cone of sticks and animal skin, some kind of temporary shelter that nomadic people threw up in a few hours and abandoned the next morning. Barely enough to keep the wind out, definitely not enough to survive a real winter, the kind of structure that makes you think, how did these people manage? How did they not just freeze to death? How did children survive? How did elders make it through February in the northern Great Plains, where temperatures dropped to -30 degrees Celsius, which is -22 degrees Fahrenheit, where blizzards came in fast and hard and didn't stop for days, where the wind chill alone could kill an exposed man in under an hour? That picture, that image of the teepee as a primitive, desperate shelter, is the lie. The truth is that the teepee was one of the most perfectly engineered pieces of portable architecture ever designed by human hands, and the people who built it, people like the Lakota Sioux of what is now South Dakota, the Blackfoot Confederacy of Montana and southern Alberta and Canada, the Cheyenne, the Comanche, the Arapaho, these were not people stumbling through winter hoping to survive. These were master engineers, master craftspeople, master readers of the wind and the snow and the cold. And the teepee they built was the product of thousands of years of refinement, testing, failure, adjustment, and genius. Let me take you to the winter of 1832, somewhere on the northern edge of the Great Plains, near what is now the border of North Dakota and Canada, and I want you to meet a man named George Catlin, a Philadelphia-born painter and writer who had left behind his career as a lawyer to travel into the American frontier and document the lives of Native American tribes before, as he wrote in his own journal, the devastating hand of civilization erased them from the earth. And what Catlin saw that winter, what he recorded in his paintings and in his detailed written accounts, was something that stunned him so completely that he spent years afterward trying to explain it to audiences back east who simply refused to believe him. Catlin described arriving at a Mandan village along the Missouri River in the dead of winter, with temperatures so severe that the river itself had frozen solid more than a foot deep, and he described standing outside in layers of wool and fur, his breath freezing in front of his face, his fingers going numb within minutes, and then stepping inside a teepee and feeling warmth. Real warmth, not the desperate smoky warmth of a poorly ventilated fire, but clean, stable, controlled warmth, the kind of warmth that made the outside world feel like a different planet entirely. And he wrote in his notebook, with a kind of astonished disbelief that you can still feel through the page 2 centuries later, that he could not understand how a structure made of poles and buffalo hide could outperform the brick and timber buildings he had grown up in back in Pennsylvania. What Catlin didn't understand yet, what would take him weeks of careful observation to begin to grasp, was that the teepee was not just a tent, it was a system, a complete environmental control system designed specifically for the exact climate conditions of the Great Plains. And every single element of it, from the angle of the poles to the placement of the door to the way the smoke flaps moved at the top, was intentional, was tested, was the result of generations of knowledge passed down from mothers to daughters, from fathers to sons, accumulated over time in a way that rivaled anything happening in the engineering schools of Europe at the same moment in history. And what's even more astonishing, what makes this story genuinely hard to believe, is that the women built it, the women designed it, the women owned it, the women decided when it went up and when it came down, and the women were the ones who knew, down to the last detail, exactly why it worked. And if you had asked a Lakota man in 1832 to explain the engineering of his own home, he probably would have told you to go ask his wife, because she was the one who actually understood it.
So the question is, how did they do it? How did they actually build something that could keep a family of 8 alive at -30 degrees? And more importantly, why did it take us this long to start paying attention? Stay with me, because the answer is going to completely change the way you see this. To understand how the teepee actually worked, you have to start not with the poles, not with the hide, not with the fire. You have to start with the buffalo. Because without the buffalo, there is no teepee, there is no winter, there is no survival, there is nothing. And the relationship between the Plains tribes and the buffalo was so deep, so total, so completely woven into every part of daily life that calling it a resource the way a modern textbook would is almost insulting. It's like calling the ocean a resource for a fish. A single adult buffalo bull could weigh up to 900 kilograms, and a single animal, properly processed, could provide enough hide to contribute significantly to a teepee cover, enough meat to feed a family for weeks, enough bone and sinew and fat to supply tools, thread, and waterproofing. And the Plains tribes, particularly the Lakota and Blackfoot of Montana and Alberta in Canada, had developed a method of processing buffalo hide that was, by any measure, one of the most labor-intensive and technically demanding crafts in the pre-industrial world. The women, and it was almost always the women, began by staking the raw buffalo hide flat on the ground immediately after the hunt, using wooden or bone stakes to stretch it tight before it could begin to contract as it dried. And then came the scraping. Hours and hours of scraping with a tool called an adze, made from bone or antler, working across the surface of the hide to remove every trace of fat, membrane, and tissue from the inner surface, because any organic material left behind would rot, would weaken the hide, would make it vulnerable to moisture and cold. And a teepee cover with rotting sections was not just uncomfortable, it was a death sentence in a January blizzard on the northern plains. After the